D-Lo 404 boxing. All right, y'all. I'm gonna talk about this Derevyanchenko versus Jermall Charlo fight right quick. Sergiy Derevyanchenko is a good fighter. This fight's worth getting excited about. Jermall Charlo is a good fighter. I have said multiple times I edge this fight to Jermall Charlo, even though I think Sergiy Derevyanchenko is a very good fighter. One thing that lends itself to me as a standout for why Jermall should win this fight, and I'm basically expecting him to get a late stoppage, is wear and tear on Sergiy Derevyanchenko. That coupled with Jermall's great jab and his come forward style, his tenacity. Sergiy Derevyanchenko is 32 years old, in contrast to Charlo being 30 years old. Not a big difference. But when you talk about fights, in the amateurs, Derevyanchenko has had he went 390-20. That's over 400 fights, 410 amateur fights. I know they're not the same professional fights, but that's wear and tear. Okay. As a pro, he's had 15 fights, went 13-2. But over his last 3 fights, and when you talk about amateur record, compare that to Jermall Charlo, who was, I think, 56-8. So he didn't have nearly as many fights. Of course, that's experience. You learn a lot having that many fights. But it's also wear and tear. Okay? Some of these guys stay in the amateurs too long. All right? But that being said, let me get to the pro record. That 13-2 is 2 losses against 2 of the top middleweights. That's Golovkin and Daniel Jacobs, who had a tough fight with one another as well. But the thing that really sticks out to me is in Sergiy Derevyanchenko's last 3 fights coming into this fight, he was in tough all 3 times. He fought he fought Daniel Jacobs for the vacant IBF title. Tough fight. He fought that fight without his trainer because he and Jacob shared the same trainer, and he still made it a close enough fight to where some people felt like he won. It was a very close decision that went Jacobs' way. Jacobs kept Rozier, and Derevyanchenko, I can't remember who he had as a trainer, but it wasn't Rozier. He has Rozier back now. The next fight, he fought a title eliminator against Jack Colkay. And if you look at the record on BoxRec, it looks like he won a pretty comfortable fight on the scorecard. But I watched that fight. That was a tough fight for him as well, that he barely, in my opinion, he barely eked out. But the scorecards don't reflect that, so it looks like a comfortable win. But he was in a tough fight with that man. And then he fought again for the vacant IBF title against Golovkin, in a fight that I felt like he won, but there again, a very rough, tough, and tumble fight in which he got dropped in that fight as well. Jermall Charlo has been cruising very comfortably since he arrived at middleweight, with the only fight that was remotely close being his fight in which he was supposed to fight, I think it was Willie Monroe Jr., and he had an adverse finding on drug test or whatever it was and had to pull out of the fight. And then the replacement opponent, whose name escapes me right now, but either way, you guys know what the fight I'm talking about. Tony Harrison. This the card in which Tony Harrison beat Jermall Charlo, and Jermall Charlo had a tough fight with the lefty, and the fight pretty much went down, came down to the final rounds, and he pulled it out and got the decision win. But a lot of people felt like he lost that fight. But aside from that, since he's arrived at middleweight, he's been pretty much cruising. He hasn't taken a lot of beating, not a lot of wear and tear on him. He looks to be the fresher of the 2 fighters, and by comparison, I look at the 2 fighters as being somewhat on the same level, but in my opinion, the fresher, younger, and might I add, bigger fighter. He stands at 6 feet tall, Derevyanchenko at 5'9". And that jab, I think is gonna carry the day, and it's gonna set the table for him to get a knockout late in that fight. And that's all I gotta say on the subject. I look forward to this fight. I will add that I really, really, really look forward to this fight. I wasn't looking forward to paying the pay-per-view to see this fight, but I feel like it's a pay-per-view worthy card with his brother on there, fighting for basically 3 belts on the line at 154. And the undercard is very solid as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing this. I will be tuning in, spending the money to be able to view the fight. And like I said, my prediction is Charlo with the late stoppage over Derevyanchenko. Just think it's just too much wear and tear, and that height and that jab is going to be too much for him to overcome. D-Lo 404 Boxing. I'm out. Peace.